Hello, everyone. It's a Friday, and it's the last Friday of June. And in the weather headlines, we have a continuous march of severe weather across the northern plains, and they've gotten hit pretty hard over the last couple of weeks, but that's typical for this time of year. We'll detail some of that. Also, a heavy rain does show up in pockets occasionally. We have one such area out in Pennsylvania, but for the 4th of July weekend, we have some areas that could get some pretty heavy rain as well. I'm meteorologist Ted Keller. Let's dive right into weather to watch. Well, the first stop is the severe weather outlook for the remainder of the outlook period, which will be this evening, overnight, and these outlooks issued by the SPC are always going to 7 a.m. the next day, so 7 a.m. Saturday. And you certainly see there's a level 3 now in North Dakota. When I did the severe weather outlooks video in the morning, that was only a 2, so that's been upgraded a little bit. Large area of the Dakotas and Nebraska under that level 2, as is a little slice of Michigan there, Detroit back into northern Indiana or so. The tornado threat is isolated, but still pretty significant. 5% chance of a tornado within 25 miles, centered in south central North Dakota, small chunk of South Dakota. There's Bismarck. I-94 runs right through here. Here's Fargo. And this area's had a lot of at least tornado potential and some pretty devastating tornadoes, especially in this area right here. That was a week ago. And Tornado Cast or NATO Cast shows and agrees that there's a 5% risk right in central and south central parts of North Dakota, maybe another little maximum there in north central portions of Nebraska. Here's a radar loop. This is around dinner time, and you're starting to see a few supercells develop here. And let's see, I think I can get that to loop. There we go. And also in Nebraska. So it pretty clearly outlines those two areas there. And nothing's developing up here yet, but the jet stream is very supportive of supercells developing there. Tornado watch in effect for just about all of central North Dakota, and a severe thunderstorm watch in effect for, well, kind of northwest Nebraska, not quite into the panhandle. Here's the HRRR simulated radar showing these thunderstorms here could be tornado producers, and this goes till 6 a.m. Saturday morning, and about an 18-hour loop, and it also shows the continuing activity there through Nebraska. It's these surface lows that actually control the surface wind field. So if you can get winds to kind of turn into the lows like that, you can sometimes get a kind of an enhancement of tornado risk, that's what this is indicating here tonight for the most part. And also for the next 3 days through Sunday, here's how the progression of severe weather goes. Here's today's level 3, and this just kind of sweeps along with the jet stream and a disturbance in the upper atmosphere that's taking that severe weather threat on into Wisconsin by Sunday. If you're curious about any particular day's severe weather outlook, and I do this, the outlooks for the next 7 days, and even look beyond into into the mid part, I should say, of July, be sure to check out my daily severe thunderstorm outlooks video. Here's the whole nation here. We're looking at a weak frontal boundary through here. There you can see the eruption of thunderstorms. The first volley, if you will, is that Nebraska activity. Haven't yet quite filled that in yet in North Dakota, but that's coming. 500 millibar analysis. One important thing here is that hot air ridge has shrunk and gone off coast, so the heat has taken a break. And actually, in the eastern 1/3 of the U.S., that's going to be the case. I'll show you some jet stream averages over the next 7 days or so that verify that. Weak little weather systems, but the strongest jet stream winds are in Montana, poking into the Dakotas. That's what's helping to fuel that severe weather risk. We also have showers and thunderstorms forming down along the front there. That front on Friday afternoon was kind of draping from Michigan right through the Chicago area into northern parts of Missouri and Kansas, and there's moisture out ahead of that is fueling those showers and storms. On the satellite loop close up, it's kind of interesting to watch these clouds blow up. That is just so cool. I never get tired of watching visible satellite. So many cool features here. You can see the streaming moisture with these cumulus clouds moving almost due north into this zone. You can see the bubbling effect when thunderstorms reach the top of the troposphere, poke into the stratosphere a little bit, so they have so much momentum upward, they poke right through a natural lid in our atmosphere. It's kind of cool. Same with this stuff out here in parts of the southeastern corner of Missouri. And despite all that, though, there isn't a lot of severe weather potential with these. The jet stream winds are too weak. Storms are kind of disorganized. There might be a few wind reports here and there. I don't think there's much of a tornado threat, and there might be a little bit of a flash flooding issue with some of these storms because they're not really moving all that fast. Let's take a look more generally at the heavy rain threats, however. In the immediate future, from Pittsburgh down through parts of West Virginia and into Virginia, we have a slight risk of a heavy rain hazard here, at least a 15% chance, enough for them to go ahead and issue a flood watch for that area that runs from western Pennsylvania right down into eastern West Virginia, and all the way down to Lynchburg, Virginia, that area under a flood watch. Pretty small, but still pretty significant. And in fact, if we just look at the Weather Prediction Center's total precipitation forecast for the next 7 days, there's a few pockets of interest. In fact, this is the flood watch that's in effect right now. And we got maybe 1 to 2 inch rain totals, maybe a little bit more in some areas. It looks like southwest Missouri, the Four Corners area of Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas will get some pretty good rain over the next 7 days. A lot of this is offshore, but enough of it is onshore to be a little bit of a threat. And notice this little area here poking out. This is the next 7 days. I want you to keep that in mind because as we look now at the heavy rain hazards, June 29th through the 4th of July weekend, we have that heavy rain hazard there from New Orleans to the Florida Panhandle, and that's that offshore precipitation total I just showed you. Some of that is poking inland, so it's enough to kind of warrant a heavy rain advisory for that period. Also, Tucson over into parts of New Mexico, likewise, through the holiday weekend. As a matter of fact, they've gone as far as to say heavy rain potential exists on July 4th through much of Arizona and a good chunk of southwest New Mexico, and generally the period July 4th through the 10th. There's kind of a larger area of threat for severe weather. This is definitely not severe weather, heavy rain. And this is definitely a monsoon pattern where moisture is allowed to come in from the Gulf and also a little bit from the Pacific as well. We'll take a look at the tropical forecast real quick. I just combined the Atlantic and the Pacific here in one view, and there's a slight chance over the next 7 days of some tropical development from a little disturbance over the Yucatan Peninsula that will move into the kind of the southwest corner of the Gulf of America, and also a slightly higher chance, 40 to 60% chance in this very active zone so far this year. That would be Flossie if a storm were to develop there. I don't recall the Atlantic name there. We already went through the first one, though. That was a very isolated storm way out in the middle of Atlantic that lasted barely enough time to even notice it was there, but the next one would be B on the list if one were to form. Not a real high chance right now, and it's at least a week away. I did want to look at the mean 500 millibar flow from June 30th through the July 6th period, and generally what this indicates is, how warm or cool you're going to be, severe weather potential, that type of thing. So the hot air ridge is really here now. It's kind of shifted into Texas. You see a general flow dipping down into the Great Lakes states and the Northeast. This is a cooler pattern of weather and more stable as well. Meanwhile, a little bit of ridging going on there in Washington and Oregon and Montana. So it looks like things will warm up out there. Severe weather is still possible on the summer slide in this area right here. In fact, dew points, if you look there, are at about normal. That's enough. But you can kind of tell looking in this general area here that we are getting a supply, if you will, of Canadian air so that the dew points are normal, maybe a little bit below normal. And look at the fuel for the rain that I was just talking about in the southwestern U.S. High dew points above the mean there in New Mexico and Old Mexico, as a matter of fact. That dark blue is pretty significant. And the last thing we'll take a look at here is some temperature patterns. So this is Saturday's high temperature forecast, 90s showing up in the northern plains, pockets of below normal temperatures, including Maine, where highs will only be in the upper 50s on Saturday. Nothing terribly hot here. The colors indicate whether it's above or below normal, and the numbers apply to the actual high temperatures for the cities. A little bit cool weather will move in on Monday along the high plains down in the area. Most of that is clouds and rain showers that are expected to develop. It reverses completely in the Northeast, and we have highs in the low 90s through much of New York State and through parts of Connecticut and Massachusetts. Pretty hot in the Pacific Northwest, too. Inland temperatures well into the 90s. On the other side of the Cascades there in Oregon and in Washington. And on Wednesday, generally speaking, not a real abnormal pattern in either direction, although we do have warm and cool pockets. Everybody's enjoying some pretty good weather. We're coming up on the holiday, of course, and if you take a look at that, So this is the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. This applies beginning on Thursday, July 3rd, and goes through the 4th of July weekend. So it does look like much of the country will be experiencing slightly above normal temperatures. The northern plains in particular, Mississippi River Valley, and particularly in the southeast, with a little bit of cooler than normal with all that rain and monsoon weather there in Arizona. And for that same period, yeah, they're going to be wet there, maybe a little bit on the moist side in Idaho and through much of the central plains. Not a great chance. This is a probability forecast. So the darker the green, the higher the confidence that that's going to happen. So, maybe a little bit wet in the central plains and not much going on there in the southeast. Thanks for watching this edition of Weather to Watch. It comes out every other day, or as the weather necessitates. Please remember to share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel, or at the very least, like what you just watched. Thanks.